All right, so for those of you that don't know, Andrew did talk about this on a previous podcast. I'm just going to go into more of the surface level, higher level, and really, really deep low level things. Kind of avoid the mid-range. So AMD Threadripper 5000 Pro WX. It is in fact coming. Let me go over some specs. It is in fact going to be based off the Zen 3 architecture with all of its benefits on power efficiency. They claim they claim this, so it's probably half in real application, 67% less power per core, with up to double the performance per power ratio on competing solutions like Intel products and other things like that. What do you get with Threadripper versus your standard consumer platform? Well, the Threadripper platform has always been about trying to go up and above the desktop platform, but not really getting into like the epic CPUs. So what do you get? You get more PCIe lanes. You get a whopping 128 versus 16. You get up to 2 terabytes on this platform, by the way, not the previous one, up to 2 terabytes of DDR4 memory, because this is all about like lots of throughput, right? It's not necessarily about speed. And there's a few other things like the IO's improved, you get better power delivery, stuff like that, and the chip is a little bit bigger. Actually, it's a lot bigger.
To clarify, we're talking specifically Threadripper Pro here, which is not the same platform as Threadripper.
That is correct. Yes, Threadripper Pro is going to be on a different platform, and I don't think they're backwards compatible. I think it's the TRS-4X or whatever socket.
They're different. They're different platforms. They're not compatible whatsoever.
Yeah,
so
they're not.
The CPUs look very similar because they're essentially the same CPUs, but different features are enabled and disabled to kind of separate the lineup. So yeah, like you said, 2 terabyte is the maximum memory support of Threadripper Pro, while quote unquote desktop Threadripper would be 256 gig.
Exactly, 256 gig is the desktop equivalent max. Now, I have only 128 gigabytes, and I find that's more than enough for everything I need right now. I haven't really need the need to go further than that. Some new features that are coming to the Threadripper Pro 5000 series platform. We got AMD Memory Guard, and encrypts your memory to prevent physical attacks on sensitive data. So there's like a lot of attacks that on computers these days. This type of attack actually goes into the memory and captures the stored memory files, because before it was just open. It was just memory. It's just temporary, right? They also have this new thing called Shadow Stack, an innovative set of hardware protections built into the processor to help mitigate a common type of malware attack by preventing memory modification for instructions. So, for example, it's stored in memory. Oh, get me this bit. Okay, well, I'm going to go in and change that. No, give me that other bit, then give it to me. Right, so this is supposed to prevent that. And there's a few other things, and of course, Trusted Platform Module, their version or whatever of it is also enabled somehow. I'm not exactly sure about that, because it's such a, gonna be a standard thing in the future.
Yeah.
So the first computer that's going to be available with this new 5000 series Threadripper Pro platform is going to be the Lenovo Thinkstation P620. And it's like a desktop computer that's supposed to be a workstation. And so you guys might be wondering, so like, why do I care about Threadripper, right? Why, I'm just gonna stay with desktop. Well, here's where it gets kind of interesting. So they're coming out with initially 5 variations. Of course, they're gonna have more later on. But at the top of the stack, we got the 5995X. Okay, so 5995. Okay. That gives you 128 threads at 64 cores, 4.5 gigahertz boost with a base of 2.7. Okay, 280 watt TTP, pretty standard stuff, nothing too crazy. 2 terabytes of ECC memory support, and that's error correcting code, so you got the good memory. Now here's where it gets interesting. They've introduced 2 lower end variants. The Threadripper Pro, I'm not going to say the number. It's going to be kind of hard to understand. So it's just 16 cores, 32 threads, which, for those that are keen-eyed among you, would know that 16 cores and 32 threads has been available for over a year now on the 5950X on the desktop platform. So why would you need to spend more money on this? Well, first of all, you get more base cache, right? So that's pretty nice. you get 128 PCIe lanes, you get more I/O support, and you get up to 2 terabytes of ECC memory, which you currently cannot do on the regular desktop. The one below that is a 12-core, 24-thread CPU, so like a 5900X, right? Same deal, 128 lanes, 70 megabytes, 2 megabytes less of cache, and all that good stuff. So that's the part I find the most interesting, that they're releasing a product that's on a next level platform with less cores, less threads than what's on the desktop platform, which may not be a big deal, but this is really going to be like blurring the lines between like commercial, like Threadripper platform and your regular desktop computer. But I mean, it also costs a lot of money, right? You're talking $500 to $1,000 just for the privilege of using that platform, like a premium. So
Yeah.
what do you think about all that, Andrew? That's a lot of stuff I just said.
Well, the Ryzen Threadripper Pro 3000 series, which used Zen 2, they also had 12 and 16 core variants of those chips.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing for Threadripper Pro is you get more PCI Express lanes, you can have more I/O, you have more memory bandwidth because it's quad channel. I think, is Threadripper Pro quad channel or is it 8-channel memory? I can't recall.
It's Octa or whatever.
Yeah,
wait.
Threadripper.
I gotta double check that. While I'm checking that,
I would
continue.
have to check as well. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but either way, you have significantly higher memory bandwidth than desktop platforms. And I think even if it's marginal, I think with the lower core counts, you're going to have higher core frequency. So it really depends on your workload, but
You can support Octa channel.
Exactly. So that's a huge amount more memory bandwidth.
Yeah.
And I think AMD wouldn't be releasing new Zen 3 12 and 16 core CPUs, Threadripper Pro CPUs, if the 12 and 16 core Zen 2 versions didn't sell well. I think some people just, I don't know, I think they just need a computer to do certain tasks, and maybe regular Threadripper would have done it, but there really isn't a Threadripper not Pro in an OEM configuration. So if like you're a studio or a business having to buy computers for your staff, and you have the Lenovo lineup, you have either Ryzen desktop chips, which I'm not really sure if they sell desktops with like 50Xs from Lenovo, but you can always get some OEM that does.
Mm-hmm.
But they're more like gaming focused computers. If you get a workstation line, you're either getting the Ryzen Pro, which is the same limitations of the Ryzen desktop chips, or you're stepping up to Threadripper Pro. There wasn't the middle ground of Threadripper in a workstation enclosure OEM ready to go out of the box kind of deal. Threadripper non-Pro was always enthusiast line, custom built computers.
Almost like the X series for Intel.
Exactly.
HED, high-end desktop platform.
Right. So you wouldn't necessarily go with those unless you're like a high-end consumer.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a business, you're probably going with Xeons.
Yeah.
So
you would just go right to server.
Yeah, well, Xeons are workstation based as well. They have server chips as well, but like the difference here is like Intel kind of says the Core i whatever is desktop, and then if you throw the X on it, it's high-end desktop. Then there's Xeon workstations, then there's Xeon servers. With AMD, they're like, okay, Ryzen is desktop, Threadripper is high-end desktop, Threadripper Pro is workstation, and then Epic is server.
Servers.
So yeah, the naming scheme's a little different between each. So like, yeah. So if you were in the market for an OEM computer and you needed all those CPU lanes, Threadripper wasn't really an option. Threadripper Pro was your only option if you needed those lanes that the desktop chips just didn't supply.
So with all that said, I actually might be considering a Threadripper Pro upgrade, not when it first comes out, but as my next upgrade.
That's interesting.
Yeah, maybe. It depends on how the performance is per dollar, Because I mean, realistically, I'd probably only get the 24 core. I wouldn't get the, because I want that speed, you know. I don't really need the 64 32 core chip. 24 would probably be plenty for me, because then I'll have 48 threads, which is fine. Because most of the stuff I do is, you know, I do more CPU based stuff now with Premiere Pro and whatnot, but 16 core 32 threads has been fine for me with 128 gigs of RAM. I was just gonna more do it for the PCIe lanes. That way I could put in like more capture cards and more like SSD devices that are really fast, things like that, and maybe a 10 gig networking in the future, maybe.
So, 10 gig networking, man. I don't know.
I'm gonna do it, man. It's gonna happen.
No, that's fine. I feel like that really soon that shouldn't be an add-in card. That should be on the motherboard and whatever.
There's a few motherboards with it already on. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the big thing with like Threadripper, and this is kind of an aside, not necessarily related to the news article, but the big thing I think is like virtualization and running VMs that you could like remote into. So if you had like 2 people, 3 people trying to work off the same computer, and you had 2 GPUs that you can now pass through to VMs in certain ways, with like a 32 core Threadripper or Threadripper Pro, you could equip each of those VMs with 16 cores and a 3090, and 2 simultaneous workloads could be taking better advantage of it than you could be doing in one Windows OS experience. So in order to leverage the extra horsepower, having multiple users via VMs is one approach. And I think that's something people should consider if they are in a situation like that. You know, I don't know, if someone had like 5 kids or something, build one like supercomputer and then give them like netbooks or Chromebooks.
7 gamers, 1 PC, Linus Tech Tips.
Yeah, well, it's gotten better since then. So
yeah, so spend $100,000 on a computer, then give all 7.
Well, the computer doesn't have to be that expensive, especially when you consider like. For a second, I was considering a Mac Studio with the new M1 Ultra chip.
Yeah, for $6,000.
And then I was like, wait, for $6,000, I can like have the best desktop ever.
Exactly.
So, yeah, with that, I changed my mind real quick.
Yeah. So the Mac Studio, just real quick on touch, it was like $4,000. I'd consider it.
It offers a lot in a small package.
Yeah, like that's what it's basically aimed at. It's called the Studio. Like it's aimed at those type of people, right? It's aimed at, like, the way I see it, it's aimed at people that are either working for a company or something and don't want to put something together. They just want to buy it, plug it in, and start using it. And they're willing to pay that $6,000 premium for that. And of course, you know, hey, look, I got a Mac, so we're pros now. We're cool. You know, there's a lot of that going on in at least that industry. Like where I work, they wanted a Macintosh computer to use Premiere Pro at my job. And the cheapest one they found that they thought they needed was like $3,000. I'm like, we could just build you a PC with a 2060 for like, well, at the time, like less than $1,000 and you'd be good. You know? So
yeah, thing is, the Macs are like, if you're used to a Mac, then getting a new Mac is the logical choice because it's going to be a very predictable experience. And
less training too.
And they just streamline moving to a new system and having everything the way it was on your old one. It makes it so simple. When you get a new Windows computer, like for me, I like that it's a clean slate and I reinstall the stuff I want. But for some people, they just want it to work exactly like the old one did.
Yeah, and you know, that's a big part about technology that a lot of people don't talk about, is that if you're upgrading something, you got to train your staff on how to use it. So the ease of transitioning is a big deal when it comes to companies and such. So if it's already on a platform that people are familiar with, they're already in the ecosystem, you know, that's kind of like what Boeing did, except they effed up and killed a lot of people. Not saying that Apple and Boeing are the same thing, just saying. Yeah, so that's going to be really interesting when that comes out. It's supposed to come out later this year. I will probably wait till next year or until the, whatever end of the year to try to let other people look at it and get a feel for it. Because I don't know, man. If something better doesn't come out by that time, I might switch to Intel.
In my opinion, if you're even considering Threadripper Pro, I would suggest you wait for the next generation.
Yeah, 5000 series, right?
Well,
one after that?
I mean following that, because all of the things that it's great for, PCI Express lanes and memory bandwidth, you're gonna likely get Gen 5 PCI Express and then DDR5 memory on the next platform.
Yeah.
So those are really the strengths of Threadripper Pro. I can't really see spending the money on it if it doesn't have the latest stuff, like Intel. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like Intel just beat AMD to Gen 5 and DDR5, but I think once AMD gets alongside them with those same features, AMD is going to have the lead once again. It's just Intel got there first, but it's like getting to the start of the race first.
Yeah, exactly.